Hello and welcome to Beyond Markets. I'm Kenneth. I'm coming to you live from the 8th Practical Nigerian Content Forum in Bayelsa State, where we're talking about how to grow indigenous oil companies in Nigeria. I'll be speaking to the man driving this move. As always, you can join us on Twitter with the hashtag Beyond Markets and follow me at Kenneth. Now, the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board is seeking to utilize its 10-year strategic roadmap to create 300,000 jobs and get the value of local retention from the current 28% to 70%. Simbi Wabote, who is the Executive Secretary for the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, joins me for this conversation. We're in Bayelsa, talking practical Nigerian content. Can you first give me the reason behind this conference?
Okay. One, the question is, why are we in Bayelsa? First, the headquarters of NCDMB is located here in Yenagoa in Bayelsa State. Secondly, when you look at the Act, provisions of the Act itself, it mandates the board to organize workshops, conferences, seminars, in order to educate Nigerians on the provisions of the Act, provide opportunity for Nigerians to showcase their capacity, and also enable international participation and exhibitions so that international companies, multinational companies will see the capacity that exists in the country. It will interest you to know that a lot is happening in this country, quite a lot, but so many people have no clue as to the capacities out there, as to the opportunities out there. So conferences like this create that platform for exchange of ideas, networking, enable people to see what we have been able to do in this country for the very short period of time, 8 years, since the enactment of the Act. We have achieved a lot, and there has been tremendous willingness for Nigerians to continue to invest in oil and gas opportunities that I'm sure we're going to talk about later. So this conference and workshops and seminar is part of what we are mandated to do as a board because of its benefit in terms of ensuring the implementation of the Act.
Interesting you mentioned a bit about awareness. For me, as while you were saying that, what was coming to my mind was, it's one thing to speak to the everyday players in the industry, but how are you taking this message out of the other companies that might not play directly in the value chain, but could be a part of it and could benefit from the Act?
Yeah, indeed. Such conferences and seminars are not closed to just the oil and gas industry itself. We invited a lot of other stakeholders that are in linkage industries. For instance, the one we are having here today have the participation of the Bayelsa State government, where all government functionaries, all ministries and departments of government have also come to see the methodology and the drive for local content improvement, which is also perhaps will rub off the kind of things they do and how they want to see the opportunities that are bound in the industry. As an example, today Bayelsa as a state produce about 1.3 billion standard cubic feet of gas per day with the Shell installation here. And most of them don't see the opportunity of gas, what they can do by partnering with the likes of Shell, ENI that are here to utilize and enhance the gas value chain for their industries, for their electricity supply, for so many things that gas can bring to the country or to the state itself, LPG. So there's active participation of the government, there's active participation of other sectors, and this is what seminars like this bring to bear.
All right, then let's move on to the theme of this year. We're looking at driving economic development and sustainability. Interesting word there, sustainability. Talks about planning for the future. I would like you to speak to this theme.
Yeah, indeed. What we're looking at is that, we've been, as a country, we've been in the oil and gas sector has been around for an upward of 60 something years over time. And to be fair to the country, a lot of progress has been made in terms of what we derive from the oil and gas industry. But the dependence on the sector is also been a challenge, in the sense that a lot of other areas that were flourishing in the past as a country have been set aside because of the petrodollar. And that has significant impact on us as a people, where, of course, the present administration is driving very hard in terms of how do we diversify the economy beyond oil. So seminars like this provided also an opportunity to different stakeholders for them to see the trend where the world is going to in terms of technology. For instance, what artificial intelligence is bringing to bear, what robotics is bringing to bear. Today, the new oil is data and data analytics. And seminars like this also open people's eye to say the world is moved on. Electric cars are becoming the in thing. And of course, you cannot generate electricity just like that if you don't have gas also. So the bulk of the electricity that will be used eventually to charge the electric cars has to come from clean energy. And clean energy is gas. So a lot of exhibitors that you saw around here also had to showcase how they are wanting to trend up with technology, in order that people see that we need to change the game in order to sustain ourselves in this business and beyond. So hence why we chose the theme. I saw some of the exhibitors, for instance, in the research and development aspect of it. I saw a student from one of the university who brought a generator that runs on water, as an example. No fuel, just normal water, and he's generating power. So that's also an opportunity for people to see that a lot can be done without oil itself. So it's the sustainability thinking and the way people are thinking we also wanted to share.
All right then. So well, we look forward now. Now I want to take us back memory lane. I can imagine the vision that came together in putting this board together, and then to fight to get the act into a law and put it all together, and for everything to come into place. Now this is 8 years running. I'd like you to speak specifically some of the experiences that would have birthed that law coming into action.
I think the major driver was, when we started the exploration and exploitation of hydrocarbon in the country, government then dependent wholly on taxes and royalties. Yeah, and they saw it, that was what the experts who were into this business brought to them to say, hey, if we get out this hydrocarbon, this is how much we pay you in taxes, this is how much we pay in royalty. When that made sense then, because the population was not as much as this, development was just coming. A lot of people lived in rural areas, city, there was no urban migration, and blah, 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 blah. So during that time when we got involved in the oil and gas sector, practically taxes and royalties accounted for what we got. In over 60 years, we invested about $350 billion in the oil and gas value chain. And we never participated in any of those. We were satisfied with the taxes and royalties. But with development, increase in population, demand of the citizens for improved life, healthcare, road infrastructure, water, electricity, and the rest of it, all the burden became it became a burden to government itself. And then government then felt there are opportunities in the whole oil and gas value chain that we could retain in the country if we participate as a country. So hence the thought to say we needed to establish a law, a policy that will help Nigerians to participate so that we retain a lot of that value. that is brought to bear in the gas value, oil and gas value chain into the country. So that was the thinking, and this started way back during the first civilian administration, which was headed by Obasanjo, when they came up with a policy on local content policy for Nigerian participation in the oil and gas sector. Before then, only 3% of the value chain activities was retained in country. Everything was done outside this country. Everything concerning oil and gas, all fabrication, all engineering design, everything was done outside this country. The only reason why they remained here was that they couldn't take out the oil from wherever they were. So all that was done. And then that government said, look, enough of this. We need to set a target and get Nigerians to participate so that we can retain more taxes. We can create more employment for our people. And we can also use that to develop some of the cities and towns that we have. So that was the major driver. And then the policy came where we set some target. By 2007, we should have 45%. And then I think by 2012 or so, we should have attained 75%. It was a policy and it was being driven. And then I think the government then handed over that policy to NNPC since they were into joint venture partnership with all the major oil and gas companies. And NNPC tried as much as they can to drive the policy through their processes, but we were not gaining traction because everybody did the implementation on best endeavor basis. Yeah, we were not gaining so much traction, and most of the times when you push the IOCs to the wall in terms of local content requirement, they say there's no legal basis why we should do it because the contracts that they have with the nothing compelling them. So I think the founding fathers thought it wise to then turn that policy into a law so that it becomes a law of the land, hence the enactment of the Local Content Act. And since then, the story has been different.
I've been speaking to Simbi Wabote, who is the Executive Secretary for the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board. More Beyond Markets continues right after the break. Welcome back to Beyond Markets. If you're just joining us, I've been speaking to the man driving the helm of affairs here at the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board as the conversation continues to heat up about local content in Nigeria. Simbi Wabote, who is the Executive Secretary, joins me for this conversation. When you look at the feedback of getting all the players together, you've been talking to them and engaging them for about 8 years now, for this is the 8th conference. You know, what are you hearing back from, on one end, the IOCs, the international companies, and on the other end, these indigenous companies that are coming out and are, you know, doing new interesting stuff?
I think the message has been all positive. The indigenous companies have been able to, if you like, gain ground in terms of participating in the oil and gas value chain. We've seen that grow over the years. For instance, before now, less than 3% of the cost of oil and gas activities was retained in country. An example, I recall a few years back, the industry spent $20 billion year on year, and less than 3% of that is left in country. Today, we are telling you that about 30% of that is left in country. We are putting about $5 billion left in country to circulate with around the economy. So that's been increasing. Again, the message you hear from the IOCs is that in some of these things we are doing, their costs are coming down. Yeah, because once you have it here in Nigeria, you employ Nigerians, it is cheaper than hiring. You could hire 10 Nigerians with which you can pay one expatriate. It's cheaper for them. And the proximity of supply is also very interesting to them by local businesses participating. Of course, given some of the security challenges that you also have in the country, which is also some of the things that have challenged the progress of local content. Most international companies will not want to come into Nigeria because of some of the security challenges they were witnessing in the Niger Delta, which is to a large extent abated. But for security of supply, the local businesses were filling up that gap So they see huge and tremendous benefit out of it, because for you to be a successful business in the country, you must live happily with your neighbors. And if your neighbors are participating in the business, they are the best security you can ever imagine that you get.
All right, so now let's look at the model now, the content development model. What are the plans for its evolution? Because we see how the industry is changing globally. We're seeing how OPEC on one hand is, influencing things. The US is, showing up their own shale oil. And when you look at the global international dynamics, we're seeing Qatar more recently saying it's going to pull out of OPEC and, focus more on its LNG, future. When you look at all those developments and you look at the model, from your engagements from the sectors so far, do you see a tweak coming on in this model?
No, absolutely. That's why conferences and seminars like this also provide opportunity for people to understand directionally where the industry is going, in order that they will prepare themselves for the next 10 years, the next 20 years. I mentioned the impact of artificial intelligence. Today, an example is you have an FPSO, which is a floating production, operation and storage facility, which is normally 150 kilometers offshore, is manned by about 150 people at water depth of 2 kilometers and the rest. The future is that you probably have less than 10 people on board the FPSO because of technology. And seminars and conferences like this demonstrate that to Nigerians who are participants in the oil and gas sector. So it's a process of tweaking what they have for the future.
Okay, so I want to get into the roadmap. 10 years, what you expect to get. You're about to move to 70% local retention. You're trying to get about 300,000 jobs come on board, and you're also trying to move the amount of in-country spend, from to about 14 billion out of the estimated 20 billion industry spend estimation. How far along are we on this?
Now, just talking about the roadmap, one thing I value about setting strategic target is that it should be very simplistic in nature and not complicated. And that's the same thing we have done in NCDMB, to keep a 10-year strategic plan or roadmap to be as simple as possible for everybody to understand. And part of it is that, look, we want to move local content participation from 30% to 70% in 10 years. We want to retain $14 billion out of the $20 billion annual spend in the oil and gas industry in country. Those are the two headlines anybody needs to know. Because once you make strategy complicated, it becomes difficult to attain. I remember one of the companies, I was reading documents the other day, and what's their strategic plan? Onshore gas, offshore oil. That's how simple it is. And then you then put the building blocks to achieve that. And that's exactly what we have done in NCDMB. Keep it simple for everybody to understand directionally, and then you put the strategic plans and then the key enablers for you to achieve that. And what we have also done in NCDMB is not just to set up the strategy and to talk about it, but we have set up champions for each of the strategic pillars that drive them, be it research and development, be it funding, be it staff capacity building, be it capacity building as a whole, both human and also the companies as such. So all those strategic pillars have champions where we review the progress on a quarterly basis. Hence, if you listen to my keynote address yesterday, I spoke about what we promised in 2017. How far did we go with our promise? And I also read out to everybody in the audience what we intend to do in 2019. So that next time when we come to such seminar,
giving them some guidance.
Absolutely. People see what we committed to, which is tied to our strategic roadmap, and how have we been able to achieve those commitments.
So I want you to speak on two things here on one end. So one is the industrial park, what you're trying to achieve with that, and how that will help you further your, your objectives, and also the new site that's coming on board.
Okay. No, I think you asked some bit of question as to how are you meeting with the global trend in terms of the oil and gas sector. One thing that is lacking in this country, which of course is bedeviled by some of the infrastructural decay that has happened over time, and which this administration is actually trying to address, be it road network, be it power, and the rest of it all. When you hear most people talk about how they will solve power problem as if it is putting on and off a switch, it is not that easy. So one of the things we intend to do as NCDMB is how do we begin to manufacture some of the components that are used in the oil and gas industry and beyond in country. But because today the manufacturing base in the oil and gas industry is probably 1%, if I will even give it that. So the whole idea of our Nigerian Oil and Gas Park scheme is to create an incubation hub for manufacturers and value-add activities in the oil and gas sector. I give you an example. No reason why you should import a completely assembled valve into the country. Even if you don't manufacture the valve because of other linkages like steel and the rest of it all, you should be able to have some value-add activities to bring the components and then assemble them here, because you will create jobs and you will help the local economy. So the park will be an incubation center for most of those manufacturing and value-add activities. And the other bit we talked about, what's the challenge to these manufacturers, is being able to give them power 24/7, security. So in the park, we are going to power the park with gas-fired generators linking up to the producing companies, such that 24/7 they have electricity. Boom, it will bring down their cost of production, as well as guarantee them the security. And then with the law, which says if it is done made in Nigeria, it must be utilized in Nigeria. Then you can effectively apply the law as it were. But you cannot read the law like a Bible. You have to read the law with what you have on ground. If not, you stop the entire oil and gas business if you read the law like a Bible. You must create the enabling environment before you interpret it to the latter.
All right, so my next question centers more around human capacity development. It's more around, first, what your initiatives are, regarding building capacity in the industry. And then secondly, if you're going to have this interesting target that you mentioned and talked about so far, you need to have some level of competence in-house. How are you planning to drive
No, that's an excellent question. But let me address, I think, the second part of the question you asked about our head office, which I think I did not. Like, we're building our head office in Yanagwa. It's a 17-story building. We also have a 1,000-seater auditorium and a 4-level car park. Of course, we don't have the staff to fill in a 17-story building, but we believe that we are creating an enabling environment for some of the operating companies to also come and incubate with us, and some other businesses that might be interested in renting out some of those floors. The building, we are also powering with a gas-fired generator, so there will be 24/7 electricity in the building to attract potential customers that will want to come and let. And then within the building itself, we're going to have a world-class leadership training facility where companies, government, all interested parties can come to train most of their management staff. It's going to be well set out and highly sophisticated, just like what you see anywhere in the world. And we're also going to have an technology incubation center within that same building, such that research experts can come in to do their research and get supported in order to actualize some of their research findings. So it's a then the multipurpose hall, of course, is not just for SCDMB for sustainability sake. Third parties can also utilize it. for their conferences, seminars, and weddings, and what have you, but under strict compliance to ensure that that facility is well maintained.
I've been speaking to Simbi Wabote, is the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board. And that's all we have today on Beyond Market. As always, you can always join us with the hashtag Beyond Market and follow me at Kenneth. Do have a wonderful evening.